Hello and welcome, everyone. Good evening. Thank you very much for tuning in this evening to tonight's webinar, Building a Brand, What Comes Next. Now, this is part two, taking a look at building a brand for your farm. The first webinar was on Tuesday evening this week. Thanks again if you're joining us following that. If you're joining this new and missed Tuesday's session, it was recorded and it will be available on the Farm Advisory Service website next week. So tune in if you missed it or you had to nip away for any reason, then you can follow up with it at a later date. My name is Callum Johnston. I will be the host for this evening's session. I work as a consultant at SAC Consulting, supporting farmers, crofters, food and drink businesses all over Scotland. I'm joined this evening by two fantastic panel members. The first and our main speaker this evening is Kerry Allison. Kerry is a senior marketing and branding consultant at SAC Consulting. Kerry has worked with hundreds of businesses all over the UK, big businesses and small micro businesses, designing and creating inspiring brands. Kerry is an expert in digital platforms, is a great colleague and a very good friend. So thank you, Kerry, for joining us this evening. We are also delighted to be joined by Caroline Piggott. Caroline is a dual qualified trademark attorney and IP solicitor. Caroline's interests lie particularly in food and drink, agriculture and technologies, and she works at HGF. HGF is a specialist intellectual property firm with offices in Edinburgh, Glasgow and Aberdeen. And Caroline is also the chair of the Intellectual Property Committee at the Law Society of Scotland. So there we go. Thanks very much for taking time out, Caroline, to join us.
Of course.
Also in the background, who you can't see, is our technical assistant tonight, Malcolm MacDonald. He is helping us with any techie issues and is working away furiously behind the scenes. Thank you, Malcolm, for also joining us this evening. And without any further ado, I'm now going to hand over to our first speaker this evening, which is Kerry. Over to you, Kerry.
Thanks very much, Callum. So, if you joined us on Tuesday night, you will know that we covered the basics. Why would anybody bother thinking about investing in a brand for their business? Where they should start thinking about that, what they get if they create a brand, and of course the biggest question, how much would that typically cost? Now, we discussed 4 cornerstones on Tuesday. They were roots, so knowing your brand identity and having that be real, authentic and trustworthy. Clarity, knowing exactly who you are and committing to it consistently. Connectivity, which is connecting to your community and giving something back. And relevance, so finding a reason to make your customers care about you. The whole time we go through the webinar this evening, I would just like you to keep these 4 cornerstones in mind. So tonight we're going to look at 3 main areas. Firstly, the design process. We're going to have a quick look at everything you can expect if you engage with a professional designer. We're going to pass over to Callum, who's going to talk a little bit about the web element, what's important to your brand if you're going to have a website. Caroline's going to take us through some information on IP, and then I'm going to close off with a session on social media and how best to share your brand. As Callum mentioned at the beginning, please do use the questions tab as we go along, and then we'll close off this evening with a good Q&A session. So, the design process. The first thing I really wanted to make clear about the design process is it is definitely more than a logo. A lot of businesses who are going through branding for the first time generally believe that walking into design office saying, I've got a rough idea for the logo that I want, and I'd like it done by Thursday on a Tuesday morning. I work with a lot of different designers all over Scotland, and I actually work with some design firms in Europe as well. I really like working with Scandinavian firms. This slide of the creative process was put together by a design studio called 42. They are fabulous to work with for rural enterprise, agri-tourism, food and drink, and more. And we do have some contact details for 42 at the end. I would just like to say thank you to them for providing this slide. So they provided this 3-stage process for the design process. The total time that it would be likely to take, and this is a best case scenario, would be 10 to 18 weeks to design a brand. Now, that is if there are no delays, if the client, you, are forthcoming with loads of information and make decisions really quickly. That is if you make up your mind on the spot about the first concept that you're shown and everything is easy. You could potentially get away with a 10-week process. The reality is that you are looking at several months. So stage 1 is the strategy. It's where any design agency would undertake market research of you, your brand, your product, your company, your ethos, and understand what makes you tick. They also want to research and understand who the customers or the audience of your brand is. They'll have a look at the market in which you operate. And most importantly, during the strategy phase, they're looking for the right words to reflect your brand. So you'll see that the first stage in the design process is definitely not about the logo. In fact, it's all about the values and the cornerstones behind the brand. There are 4 design pillars that really help to be able to walk into a design agency with. They're known as made since, made in, made by, or made with. If you are able to say that your brand has heritage or history, if it's got provenance, community, locality, if it's made by somebody or a company of renown, if it's something recognizable, or if it's made with, so something like a secret or an unusual ingredient or an unusual concept. If you can get one of these 4 things into the design process, it helps your designer to create something more compelling for you. In the market piece, you need to be able to go into your designer and tell them, as we discussed in the first webinar, who cares about what you're doing, what is it that they care about, and why, most importantly, why would they choose you more than anybody else? And that really key piece of the strategy, the words, your design agency want to find words that are driven by emotion. So all of our choices as people are generally driven by emotion. So the words that you put to your brand should be memorable and provocative. Most agencies will go for positive provocation. So they want people to associate something really positive with the words. But there are some brands that go in another direction and can use provocative wording in such a way that it creates a shock response from the audience. Knowing these things, the bullet points on the slide, before you go in to engage with your designer is going to make the process A, quicker, and B, cheaper. So the second stage in the design process is the creativity stage. This is where we start looking at artwork, color concepts, ideas, look and style, the tone of voice of the brand, and the overall message. This generally will take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes up to 2 months. What's key at this stage is that your designer has the ultimate goal of doing kind of as little as possible for you to get you to a point where you're happy. So my biggest piece of advice at the creative stage of the design process is don't commit to the first design that you see. You should always be given a few concepts to consider, and you should always provide really critical feedback because you want the designer to work to get the best for you. So critical feedback can be something as small as, I'm not sure if I like the spacing in the font, or you've got it completely wrong and I don't like it at all. You should provide as much feedback as specifically and in tiny little chunks as possible to allow the designer to come back with more concepts that are right for you and your brand. Most importantly, I would really recommend using a brand consultant or an advisor or someone external to your business who can look at this in an unbiased way and advise you on the best brand image to get the desired results for your customer base. And also, this is the point at which you really want to be engaging with your attorney or legal advisor. We will come to Caroline in just a few moments, who will explain exactly what should be happening at this point. So when you start to give that critical feedback to the designer, when you're giving those tweaks, make sure that you come back to those cornerstones. It can be really easy to start getting carried away with an amazing, beautiful, fantastic piece of artwork. But if it doesn't communicate your relevance, your roots, your story, and to what and to whom you are connected, then you're losing that path for your brand. So stage 3, the final stage, is the delivery. So this is where you should be happy with everything that you've chosen, and the designer is ready to give you your complete brand identity. So this may come in the form solely of digital. It may be physical. It depends what kind of business you are branding. But no matter what kind of business it is, you absolutely must ensure that you get a set of brand guidelines from the designer. So a brand guideline is usually a downloadable PDF. It can be done on a digitally hosted site. Some designers, maybe with less bells and whistles, will just send you it in an email. However, what you definitely want is a list of the Pantones or colors that are specific to your brand, the fonts that are specific to your brand, particularly if a designer has created a font for you, they have to provide you with the source font. Your brand guidelines should also include invert options. So if your brand is usually white on blue, they need to be able to show you if you're doing it in monochrome, or if someone asks for it on blue on white, what do the other options look like? They should also provide you with a visual language. So you'll see in the delivery below, the iconography here, the picture, all of the letters overlap and touch. That might be part of the visual language of a brand. So you expect to see things like little arrows or all the letters touching. They should also give you a steer on what your tone of voice as a brand is, and make sure that you have the originals of everything. And particularly when it comes to digital artwork, make sure that you have all of the originals so you can scale and vector up and down. In that brand identity piece, quite often a designer will give you a logo and say you should be able to use that across multiple platforms. I just want to reiterate, the designer works for you, and it should be part of the overall package for you to say, I need it on paper, I need it to be digital, I need it on business cards, I need it on catalogs, I need it on a banner, I need it on livery, I need it on signage for outside, I need a logo that works on clothing, and they can all be subtly different. Your designer should work with you to make sure that your brand is used physically in all of the places that it can be. So for those of you who think that's all well and good to come to watch a design webinar and for me to say it's not all about the logo, don't you worry. I've got a short 2.5-minute video here to show you some of the top logo trends of 2020. So anyone who's interested in finding out more about what really works and what really doesn't when it comes to logos, the website that flashed up at the end there is called Graphic Mama. So it's graphicmama.com, and they put out absolutely amazing content every week on their social media, all about graphic design, logos, and what works for business. So the last little bit on logo and design, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about favicons. So what on earth is a favicon? As you'll see, it is the tiny little icon that appears in your tabs online when you're in a web browser. Now, why am I taking time during this webinar to talk to you about favicons? Because when it comes to brand recognition and when it comes to that top of mind recall and getting customers to really feel comfortable and connected to you, oftentimes for many people, the majority of places that they're going to see you is online. And if you choose a logo that's multicolored or incredibly detailed, when it becomes the size of a favicon in your browser, it merges into nothing. So there is definitely a case with favicons where simplicity is key. Okay, with that, I have hopefully walked you through the lengthy time, the not inconsiderable expense, and a lot of the thought and emotional decisions that go into creating a brand. So now I'm going to pass you over to Caroline, who's going to tell you why and how it's so important to protect that.
Thanks very much, Kerry. Yes, so welcome back, everybody, if you were able to join on Tuesday. So again, we're going to recap the distinction between a brand and a trademark, because what I'm going to talk about is how you protect trademarks, and I think it's important to link those in your mind in terms of what's what. The brand is so much bigger; it covers everything. It captures your values, what you say about your company, what other people say about you. It's this sort of living, breathing thing. A trademark is a piece of intellectual property. It is an asset. It's registered in relation to fixed goods and services. And that is registrable in a way that it can hold the value of the goodwill, hold the value in the brand. So that top of mind recall that Kerry was just mentioning, that's key in trademarks. So first of all, let's look at what is a trademark. And some people automatically think it's just the logo. And some people think, oh, well, it's the company name. But the truth is, it's anything, it's any mark, whether that's, a word, an image, a logo, a sound, a color, that allows customers to identify your company and distinguish from your competitors. So we've got a couple of examples on the screen there. So we've got the Glenfiddich, which is I've written just the words. Then you've got little Mickey Mouse, so that makes you think of Disney. It doesn't say Disney anywhere on the screen. Then you've got the interesting way that Cadbury is written, and again, that's very recognizable, even if it didn't say the word Cadbury. Say it said Caroline, but it was in that style. That would bring to mind Cadbury. And then you've got the slogans. You've got the Nike slogan on the right hand side there. So the more traction you get in the marketplace, the more awareness there is of your company, of your brand, of your products, the more you can pack into a trademark. So at its core, it's a source identifier. But as you grow, it can carry the values and efficiently communicate various things to whatever you want to your customers. There are, however, limits. And the big one is that it has to be distinctive. So this is something that when you're speaking to your designers, you want to remember it. You want that top of mind recall, both for you and your customers. Plus, if it's descriptive or generic or misleading, which we won't go into today, but it has to be distinctive. It cannot describe the thing that you want to protect. It's a monopoly right, which means it's terribly valuable, because in the UK and the EU especially, they're first to file countries. That means it doesn't matter who's got the better right to it. If you're organized and you apply for the mark first, great, you win. So there's the question of whether or not you should always enforce your rights, and that's a commercial question and perhaps something again for another day. But the big thing to take away here, and again, mention it to your designer, you shouldn't ever use a name or logo which is already in use by somebody else. However, that is in reference to the relevant goods and services. So you've got the mark and you've got the goods and services, and they should always be considered together. And the reason for that is because whilst you get this monopoly right, you don't get the unique freedom to use that word or that image for all goods and services. You apply for a trademark in relation to specific and named goods and services. If they're unconnected, there's no confusion in the marketplace. And so a good example here would be something like Polo. It could be talking about a mint or a car or a clothing brand. And they coexist quite happily because they're not similar products. So when you're thinking about a name or a logo that you might wish to adopt, don't freak out if there's something that you recognize pertinent to something that is completely unconnected with your industry. So that's something worth remembering. There's the "we are" in the circle. You can only use that if the trademark is registered. You sometimes see people putting a TM. It doesn't mean anything at all. There's nothing wrong with doing it, but if you have gone to the bother of getting a registered trademark, which obviously I think you should, definitely make use of that R. Hugely significant, and it tells both your competitors and your customers that you take your IP seriously, you're proud of your brand, and you've invested in it, and therefore you will protect it. Moving just to the blue bit on the left of the screen very quickly, it is much easier to stop somebody else if you have a registered trademark. You do get unregistered rights just by using a mark, but it becomes a sort of rabbit hole of problems and, frankly, cost. If a problem arises and you're having to demonstrate, well, this is when we started using it, this is what we've used it on, and it's so easy for things to go wrong. Whereas you've gone through the design process, you've run clearance searches, which some designers will be able to help you with, failing which a trademark attorney can help you basically legally check that the brand is available for adoption. You know it's clear, you register it, anybody else comes along thereafter, you're able to show them your registration and say, you cannot do this, you're infringing my trademark rights. And it's simpler, you can sleep better at night, and your brand is better protected should you go for things like investment rounds or should ultimately wish to sell the business. So there's a wee link just at the bottom there for SITMA is the Chartered Institute of Trademark Attorneys, and you can run a search for a chartered trademark attorney near you, or one that you just like the name of, whatever, but cannot emphasize strongly enough how valuable and important it is to speak to your attorney at the creative phase when your designer is offering you, 4 or 5 different options. It might be that 2 or 3 of them are not legally available, and if you don't do those checks at that time, it can cause you a big headache later, and it's not the designer's job to know if it is legally free for adoption. Thanks, Kerry.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Absolutely. The importance of getting all of the steps in order along the road really will ultimately give you a brand that not only has longevity and security, but really speaks volumes about your brand. These are just a few of the more rural examples that 42 have worked on in the last year. Okay, and with that, I am going to pass you over to Callum.
Thank you very much, Kerry. I'm now going to cover web development. So I'm going to take you through some of the basics, basic principles of what makes a really good website. Now, some of you may be thinking, do I really need a website, and how do I go about creating one? Now, your website is effectively your shop window. It provides the first impression of your brand and products and services. And your website should ideally reflect everything that you want your customers to know and remember about your business and brand values. Now, remember that people are visiting your website because they want to learn something. You want to ensure that their experience when they're on your website is positive, and that they can find what they want really quickly and with ease. The quality of your website is crucial. So you want to have a really good website that reflects the quality of your brand, products and services. And you can invest a lot of time and a lot of money in product design, packaging, brand creation, brand development. But if your website is poor, it will effectively reflect badly on your business and turn customers away. So first of all, you really need to decide what your website is for. Is it a simple landing page providing basic information such as products and services, or are you looking for a website with some sort of functionality, whether that's an online shop or engagement? Professional web design costs, generally speaking, are between £4,000 and £15,000. And please don't fall into the trap that some people do by thinking, well, my brother has a friend who works in IT, so yeah, he can build my website for me. Try and steer away from that. But you don't have to have professional support. You can do it yourself. Two web design sites that we would recommend are Wix and WordPress. They allow you to create very simple landing pages. So about us, it could be about your products, services, it could be like the history of the farm, some contact details, some basic details about like phone numbers, email addresses if they want to get in touch, and also links to their social media. There is guidance available, so HubSpot, use the link there. HubSpot provide a step-by-step guide on how to create a website. So click on the link on the screen, and that should take you straight there. If you are doing it yourself, please apply the brand guidelines that Kerry has been talking about earlier tonight and also on Tuesday to ensure brand consistency. As I said, you can invest a lot of time, energy, and money in brand development, so please ensure that these feed through to your website. If you are looking for a functional website, we generally recommend getting professional support. A professional web developer will help you build a bespoke website for you and your brand. They'll make it stand out from competitors. So if you are looking for any kind of functionality, an online shop, taking payment details, it could be delivery details, booking accommodation. So if you're say operating, if you've got glamping pods or lodges or that type of thing, signing up for newsletters or even like reservations would come into that category. A web developer will ensure that there is brand consistency throughout, and they will help you to make sure that all the fonts, logos, the tone, color, and design are consistent. So a little investment to get your website right from the outset is really important, particularly if you are entering the market, you're launching new products and wanting to capture market share or increase your brand recognition in the market. So this brings me on to navigation and usability of your website. Now, customer engagement is crucial. You have a maximum of 15 seconds to capture interest. Some people say 5 seconds, but generally speaking, if customers cannot find what they want on your website within 15 seconds, then they're just going to click out. And effectively, that is a lost opportunity and a lost sale. Try and keep your website minimalistic in design, so try and keep word count to a minimum. The navigation of the site should be simple, intuitive, and functional. And try to keep the number of pages and click-throughs to a minimum, as this can lead to customer frustration if they can't get to where they want to be. And on that point, poor functionality reflects badly on your brand products and services. So when developing a website, it's also important to consider mobile compatibility. It's now generally recognized that over 90% of customers view products and services on a mobile device before purchasing. So it's essential to ensure navigation and use on mobile devices is as smooth as possible. I've put two examples on the screen. The first is Rora Dairy, the second is Kilnford Farm Shop. Both are very easy to navigate on mobile devices. Both sites are very visual, as you can see, they're logical. If you want to find out about the farm, stockists, where you can buy products through Rora Dairy, or even at Kilnford, what seasonal veg is available, then it's all really easy at the click of a button or the click of a screen, as the case may be. And interestingly, we love the Rora Dairy branding. It's fun, it's visual. Their use of font is really nice. I guess Kilnford have gone for a more simplistic design. I guess it's personal preference. Both are really good and fantastic websites. And that neatly actually on that topic moves me on to imagery and visual asset. Now, certainly as a rule of thumb, when you're developing a website, we would recommend investing in professional photography and videography to make your products and brand unique and stand out from your competitors. Visually, your website should be fairly simple in design, with open spaces, bright colours, and aesthetically pleasing. We also recommend the use of short videos. Short videos are really good for engagement, and particularly for farm businesses is a really good way to put your brand story across. Now, to illustrate all of this theory, I've actually pulled out a few examples just to go through. The first example I've got is Arn Prior. As you can see, Arn Prior has a very attractive homepage. It's very simple, and it signposts you as a customer exactly where you want to go. So if you want to stay at the farm in one of their glamping pods, you can clearly click on the link, or indeed, if you're wanting to book in for a lambing experience in the spring, you can click on the link and it takes you straight there. They also have an About Us. They also have an About Us bit, which gives information about the farm. It constantly links back to their brand and their personality. And you can see there, it's a family business, multi-generational, and it's very personable with the old tractor and the pumpkins, which is really nice. At the bottom, it also links to their social media, encouraging customers to follow them on Instagram or sign up to their newsletter for regular updates. My next example is Hugh Grierson Organics. As you can see from this website, it's incredibly welcoming, it's visually pleasing, and it directs you again exactly where you as a customer want to go. So if you click on shop beef or shop chicken, it will take you to their product range. Imagery is clear, it's professional, and another thing I really like about this is the use of props. So they've used wood as a backdrop. They've also got other ingredients you can see there, like onions and garlic and carrot and stuff, which also just gives more of a story and some sort of recipe options. The next step in the process is you can add to cart. Once you've done that, it will then take you to the checkout and payment. Now, this is the step that customers least enjoy. So manually inserting their details, billing details, delivery details, it can be quite cumbersome. So try and keep this to a minimum and keep it simple. At this point, your customers have committed. They've already committed to a purchase, so don't lose them at the final stage. And please, as a final point, if your products are not available, if they're not in stock, please make sure that this is clearly visible to avoid disappointment. I know myself, there's nothing worse than you go to the effort of making an order, you put in all your details, and then it comes up with a warning message, sorry, these products are not available. And that is just going to frustrate customers, and some may or may not come back. And on that point, that concludes my short section on web development, and I'm now going to hand back over to you, Kerry.
Thanks very much, Callum. That was wonderful. I'm going to round off this evening's webinar by talking a little bit about social media. Now, why am I talking about social media in a webinar discussing brand? As Callum mentioned there, your website can be a fantastic shop window for your brand, be it products, services, be it simply a story that you're trying to sell. Now I'd like you to imagine the thickest, deepest, darkest forest that you can. And now imagine that you've built your shop in the middle of that forest. and there is no signage, you have done no advertising, and nobody knows that you're there. Social media is the signpost to your shop window. Social media is the tool that will direct people to your website. Social media allows people to engage and connect with you. Social media creates paths, and much like with a physical path through a forest, the more often a path is walked, or in this case, the more often a link is clicked and followed or shared or liked on social media, the easier that path is then to find for other users. Social media is essential if you are going to have a web page. Generationally, we see 90% of millennials using social media, 77% of Generation X. But the reason this slide is here, and I think most importantly, we are still only at 48.2% of baby boomers, slightly older generation. What that means is you cannot rely on social media and social media alone to do all of your marketing for you if anyone in the top end of the generation is a target market consumer for you. We're still not even at 50% of them actively using and engaging with social media. Some of you might be out there thinking, I hate social media. If you were marketing to yourself, you also have to consider where to put your brand in traditional marketing, i.e. newspapers. However, if you do decide to use social media to direct to your website, the chances are you're probably going to go for one of these two platforms. Number one, Facebook, the most popular and famous in the UK, or number two, Instagram, which is the second most popular, but is actually the third most famous social network after Twitter. Twitter is not as popular as Instagram, but more people know about it. So when it comes to Facebook for your brand is super important, again, to maintain that consistency. So if you use a particular type of imagery or you've had your professional photography done and that's a banner on your homepage or your website, you want to use that as a banner on your Facebook page. You want the step between your social media and your website to be seamless. You want people to feel comfortable switching between. Also bear in mind that for most social media, your profile picture for a business should be your logo. And for almost all social media, that will be a circle. Bear that in mind when designing your logo, as logos that fit neatly within a circle work far better on social media. Bear in mind that your Facebook account shouldn't be used as a blog for your brand. It's not a place for you to rant and rave. It's not a place for you to share a huge amount of opinion. If you're using your Facebook for marketing, for your brand, it should be linking to your website. So you want to get something called click-through, which basically means that anything that you're doing on Facebook gets some engagement and some interaction. So if you have a blog on your website, by all means, link to it from your Facebook page, but don't start writing mega massive posts. And my final tip for you as a brand on Facebook, like, share, and engage with other businesses' posts. So an awful lot of people get hung up on creating their own amazing content. However, you as a brand want to be seen to be social, to be active, to be supportive in your community. You'll remember right back at the beginning of the presentation today, I talked about connectivity for brands and giving something back to your community. Now, for some of you out there, it will be possible to give back to your local community, the literal region within 10 miles of you. But for some brands, their community is online. So you want to be able to connect with, to like, to engage, to share with that online community. You'll see here on these slides, there's also a link, another link to the HubSpot website. HubSpot is an amazing digital marketing agency, and they release really great free content every week on how to do digital marketing in the best possible way. There is a guide there for how to use Facebook for marketing to its best. So the second platform, Instagram, again, I've linked a HubSpot article here for how to use Instagram for marketing. Again, you want to make sure that if you're using a logo, if you're using imagery, that copies across to your website, or it copies across to your physical shop, or it copies across to the brochure that somebody might have seen. You want it to be a seamless transition. The other thing I'll say with Instagram, there's a huge opportunity for brands on Instagram. So what you're looking at in the image here is what we call the grid. This is where you effectively want to put good quality images that give a picture, a flavor, or an idea of who you are and what you do. If you see on the left-hand side, there's a pink and orange circle. That is, some of you who use Instagram will recognize the story or live feature. What that does is it allows you to give a behind the scenes look at your brand. So if the grid were that shop window, that nice display, the live or story function is if somebody walked inside and wanted to come and speak to you, that's where they meet you. So that's a huge opportunity to really show the personality, tone of voice, and values behind your brand. With Instagram, again, connect with your community. So like, comment, and share other people's posts, be they your customers, your audience, or other businesses. And finally, please, and I can't stress this enough, please take the time to learn how hashtags work on Instagram. If you're going to go to the time and effort of having brand presence on a social platform, you absolutely need to understand how to use it to its best advantage. I've linked here to a blog post by a company called SAC Social, and what this does is it gives you a very easy 7-step process into how to find the right hashtags for your brand. Now, we advertised this webinar as from tractors to TikTok, so I would not be doing my job if I did not round up our webinar this evening by talking about TikTok. So if you have teenagers at home, the chances are you are now intimately familiar with TikTok and have probably been forced into some fairly cringeworthy choreographed dance routines over the last few months. Don't worry, I'm not going to suggest that we all do that at the end of the webinar. At the moment, if your brand's target demographic is aged between 13 and 30, so Generation Z into millennials, then you would definitely want to consider having a TikTok strategy. However, in saying that, all social media platforms eventually age up. So there was a point at which Facebook was just full of kids, and now the age demographic is gradually getting older and older. So it is worth considering TikTok for your brand. What is TikTok? Essentially, it is bite-sized videos. Some people describe it as the bite-sized version of YouTube. Most people prefer to engage with videos than to read content. What can you do with your brand on TikTok? I would encourage you to go away from here, set up a TikTok account, and check out Farmer Pete on TikTok. He is an Australian llama and alpaca farmer who has become a global sensation due to his frankly hilarious and sometimes questionable 2-minute long TikTok videos where he gives us an in-depth but real look at farming life. So don't discount it. Have a look, give it a go, and see what you can do. See if you can take it from tractors to TikTok.
Thank you, Kerry. That's great. And embarrassingly, I myself have featured on TikTok doing a very silly dance, and yeah, I wouldn't like anyone to see it, see me doing it. That concludes tonight's session. We do have time for a Q&A session. Before we start the Q&A session, I just want to draw everyone's attention to our contact details. All of our contact details are available on the slide. If you would like to discuss anything in confidence that you don't feel comfortable putting in the chat box or the questions box tonight, if you would like to speak to us on a personal basis, then please get in touch for a no obligation consultation. And if you quote Farm Advisory Service on your inquiry, we will know where it has come from. Now, there is another name on the slide there. Kerry mentioned 42 Studio. Mark Kemp at 42 is a great guy. He's got a brilliant team behind him, and they are great brand developers, whizzes on all digital platforms and web design. So Mark's details are there if you would like to get in touch. And that brings us on to our Q&A session. Thank you to those of you who are putting questions in. It's great to see you're getting involved. I'm going to kick off. This is a question for you. I'm going to pose to you, Kerry, if that's okay. If you get a web designer to build a website, who is responsible for updating the content, and how regularly would you recommend updating the content?
Great question, and one of those questions that has a two-part non-committal answer, which everybody loves, which is if you would need to discuss that with the developer. So there is always going to be an ongoing what's called a hosting cost for your website. Sometimes that will sit with the developer, sometimes you will choose to do that elsewhere. If you do it with the developer and you have a good relationship with them, then they should sort of update it, keep it compatible, check your security certificates, and also be on hand to update any content as and when you need to. I would say there's no schedule for updating content, but definitely remind yourself to book it in twice a year just to check that it is all still relevant. And if you do change something in the business, so particularly contact details or booking details, do remember to get that updated as soon as possible.
Thank you, Kerry. So yeah, don't put it on the back burner and forget about it. The next question I'm actually going to ping over to you, Caroline, if that's okay. And it relates to images and the use of imagery. So who effectively, if you were to use a professional photographer, who owns the images? Who owns the IP, sort of copyright of those images?
That's a really good question, and actually it is counterintuitive, the answer. The answer is the creative, so the videographer, the photographer, that's the default. So with IP, it is a reward of creativity. So unless you have a contract that says you will own the images, the default, even if you pay the photographer for their work, the photographer will own them, and they will generally grant you a license. But that license may be 1 year, it may be 3 years, but it wouldn't necessarily grant you the perpetual use or indeed the royalty-free use of the images that you have commissioned. So definitely best to get it in writing. Same applies for Google Images. People sometimes assume if they're building their own website that if they can find it on Google Images, it's in the public domain. That is, that's not accurate. And copyright lasts for 70 years after the death of the creator, so a very long time. Like Winnie the Pooh is still in copyright, for example. So it's old, but you can get images. So Kerry, I don't know if you've got sort of preferred platforms where you would recommend getting stock images, or you want to chime in here at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So stock images are great to use because they're all on the websites because they have permission to be used, open source. Some sites you will pay a subscription for, other sites are free. The free ones are definitely limited. If you're just starting out with stock images and having a look for social media or website, then I would definitely recommend sites like Splash or Flickr. But as you get used to the sort of the free ones, then you might start seeing targeted advertising online for some of the paid for banks.
Great stuff. Thank you, Caroline and Kerry, for that response. We've also got a question here. This is a great question that's come in. Obviously, these two webinars have been aimed at those businesses sort of looking to build a brand and at very early stages. Kerry, what would your advice be for those that have got established brands or perhaps looking to update their brands?
Cool. So I think the first question for me with any brand considering a rebrand is going to be why. So if you're rebranding for the sake of rebranding, that could be potentially quite expensive, and it might not actually be the thing that you need to do in the business. It might be how you're marketing the brand that might be looking to change. If you've inherited a brand or you've had a brand for so long that you want to do something completely different with it and you are looking to rebrand, sorry, that's a helicopter above me, I do apologize. Yeah, if you're looking to rebrand, then I would definitely advise thinking about the pillars that I mentioned in the design process, which is made since, made by, made with, and made in. So if you have an existing brand that you're looking to develop, use those pillars when you speak to the designer to hold on to what's important. Because particularly if it's been going for some time, you will have goodwill and you will have loyalty from a customer base, and you want to pull all of that through into the refresh or whatever you're doing with it. Rebranding in itself is a science, and in a previous lifetime before I joined SAC, I rebranded something several times. So if anybody would like to speak to me directly, then please do take my email address, drop me a line, and I would be more than happy to have a quick chat with you about what you're thinking. Caroline, is there anything from the legal side of things that people should consider when rebranding?
I think many of the issues are the same as if it's a new brand, but I think that point that you just mentioned about there being existing goodwill is something that's perhaps worth considering. What I sometimes advise people to do is for a period have the old brand being presented alongside the new to sort of help the customer base transition to the new trademarks. But in terms of how you go about it in the process, it's fairly similar. You're maybe just starting from a better knowledge base of who you are and who you're aiming at. And again, that notion of why you're doing it will answer all questions.
Great, thank you. And would both of you generally be pretty open and welcome to have an initial chat on the phone with anyone tuning in tonight? Would that be all okay?
Definitely.
Yes.
Great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm determined to keep us on time and on track tonight as host. Just to reiterate, both of these webinars have been recorded. They will be available on the Farm Advisory Service website as of next week. So tune in next week. If you would like to find out more information about other webinars that are ongoing, it's not necessarily this topic, it can be other topics, then head to the events page on the faz.scot website. And without any more from me, I just really want to thank our two panelists. I want to thank Kerry and Caroline for your time this evening. And I also want to thank Malcolm MacDonald, who has been working away in the background. Thank you, Malcolm. And unless there's anything else you guys want to mention, I just wish everyone a very enjoyable evening. Enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you.
Thanks, Callum.
Thanks.